Hi, I'm Stephen Feinberg, Executive Director of the Rhode Island Film and Television Office. Tonight we have an amazing guest. He's been the producer of shows like Gone Baby Gone, The Town, and most recently, the Emmy Award-winning HBO Max series, The Gilded Age. David Crockett, welcome to Double Feature.
Thanks for having me, Stephen.
So you're in Los Angeles right now. I know you just finished season 2 of The Gilded Age, which was created by Julian Fellows of Downton Abbey fame. And we loved having you here in Rhode Island and Newport for season 1, and we were here when you were filming season 2. Are you happy with season 2?
Oh, we're really excited. You know, it comes out now in a couple weeks or less. It is you get some of the bugs of the first season out. You've introduced all your characters, and we have a lot of characters, and you get that rolling, and now you come into a season 2, and you can just jump right into great stories because the audience knows these characters, and so we're really excited, and we think it really delivers on a lot of levels, and that people will really enjoy it.
You know what's neat, when we originally discussed bringing the Gilded Age to Rhode Island, to Newport, and obviously we had discussed the scripts and all, and we knew who the characters were, but the audience didn't know who Bertha Russell was. But now, if I say, oh, there's Bertha Russell, everybody's head's going to spin around. People love the characters. They love the Russells.
They're just a great they're great power couple of their time, and they were sort of emblematic of a couple of the time, but they're also very unique in that they really support each other. They are really a team. They work together. Bertha and George are just, they're fun to watch. I think in this season they have a few hiccups. Every relationship over time has its challenges, and they have a few challenges that we'll see. But I think we all have an underlying understanding and a sense that they're in it for the long haul.
If you had to give a synopsis of what The Gilded Age, the series, is for those who maybe haven't seen it, could you provide that for our audience?
Well, I think it's it's a show that really is it's in the vein of Downton Abbey in a way of there's a large cast of characters. It's upstairs, downstairs. But our show, differing from that show, is of really America at its sort of at the dawn of the industrial age, obviously the Gilded Age, and it's the beginning of this whole system of this American financial system. The world is really taking off at this time. It's post-Civil War, and we have a large cast of characters, 2 families who live across the street, one old money, one new money, which is a story that you could set in many eras, which is there's one family that's sort of set in their ways. There's a new family who's coming in. They've got these new ways and with new money. And it's kind of the battle between them, or the challenge of them being neighbors and really trying to get along and move forward in the world. And amongst that, we have a cast of characters of that's close to 30, and we touch on a lot of different aspects of life during that period.
And the show takes place in New York, and then the summer cottages, what were then called summer cottages of Newport, Rhode Island. I know that we here in Rhode Island have been so excited, that the Preservation Society of Newport really has made sure that these mansions, these authentic museums, have been preserved, restored. I think they spent about $7 million recently just upgrading and making sure everything at Rosecliff is up to its full potential. And as they were actually restoring, like some of the front doors, they found some more gilded frontage of on the front doors. Has that helped the production to have the authenticity of the locations here in Newport?
The short answer is yes, incredibly. The show is set in New York, primarily on a fictional 61st Street, right along the park there, Central Park, two houses right across the street from each other. But and again, these are families with means at that time. One of them is a robber baron, George Russell. Bertha Russell is his wife. That set did, what society did during the summer, during that period, was they went to Newport and they went to the Newport cottages. So that was always part of the story that Julian wanted to tell. What we came to find once we actually started to get into it, and we visited you and we visited the Preservation Society cottages, I would call them grand mansions. Mm-hmm. Once we visited, it really became evident that we not only wanted to place more of the story there, but there was always going to be an element of the actual story set in Newport, Rhode Island, because that, again, it's true to the period. But then we learned that we could use these mansions, use a room in the mansion, use our biggest, most long running set that we use consistently is we use the kitchen at the Elms. Right. And the kitchen at the Elms is the kitchen of the Russell house in New York. So that's a set that we revisit virtually in every episode. So we have come to shoot the Tennis Hall of Fame. We've shot Belcourt. We've shot and again, countless. I wouldn't say countless. I would say 6 or 7 of the Newport Preservation Society mansions we have filmed in over the years, and I can't even imagine making the show without that resource, without their support.
What I thought was really neat, I don't think you guys had been to the Tennis Hall of Fame. I think we actually had you visit. It was in the winter. We were in. It was just a snowstorm.
That's true. I remember. Yeah.
But I said you got to check out the Newport Hall of Fame, of which you guys did an amazing recreation of the time period, to the point, and the audiences, I'm sure they will not see this or appreciate it, but the fact that you made the netting appropriate for the time period, that kind of authenticity is amazing. And again, that might not be, an average viewer is not going to notice that, but those folks who are in the world of art directors and production designers are going to see that detail was so important, and it's a spectacular show.
If you look closely at there's a chair umpire, and there is a ball person. I think it was a man. I'm trying to remember, but I remember the outfit more because we had to kind of approve it in advance, and it was just the level of detail, like you're saying. The way it was designed and crafted, you just believe that it's real. You know that it's real because it's so different from what we see today. So yeah, they do an amazing job.
How would you define the 2 seasons? So season 1, you've established these characters, and by the way, you guys did a groundbreaking job with the African American experience, which I think enlightened a lot of us. But how does season 2 progress as far as, is there a different vibe to season 2 than maybe season 1? Are there certain things that might be surprising for us that you can share?
Sure. Season 1 was sort of an introduction to the world. It was Marion Brooke, played by Louisa Jacobson, had just arrives in episode 1 into the city, and we see a lot of things through her eyes, and it becomes between Christine Baranski's character and of Agnes and let me be clearer here. Louisa Jacobson Marion Brooke comes to town to stay with her aunts. Her aunt is Agnes Van Ryn and Ada Brooke. Agnes is the head of that household, Christine Baranski. She becomes the principal rival, and Christine is the old money. She becomes the principal rival of Carrie Coon, who plays Bertha Russell, across the street. So the whole first season is really sort of that introduction to the world, and then it's a battle of old money versus new money. Basically, again, there are many stories going on, but Bertha Russell wants to host a party at her house and wants to have people come. She's the new money. Nobody wants to touch her. So that is sort of the framework of the season. And then throughout that, we meet and do so many things. At the end of that season, she has some success. She sort of uses every available asset she has, bribes, cajoles, tricks people into coming to this party. They come to the party. It's a wild success. She's part of society. Right. Season 2, now she's in society, and it is her basically trying to ascend to the head of society and sort of supplant Mrs. Astor, or at least at a minimum, become an equal.
It is power
and that
struggle.
Is in the framework of there's opera wars, and the 2 rival opera houses are opening on the same day in 1883. True story. So Mrs. Astor is with the old money. Carrie Coon is representing the new money, and throughout the season, they go back and forth and see who's going to
this power struggle, this amazing power struggle. And yes. That's the other thing you brought up. I thought was really neat that you brought up, and I know Julian does a lot of homework, but you guys, through your research, find out what is happening during that time period, and you can use that as I guess like a journey by using these true stories and true experiences, like you did in season 1 with the lighting up in New York City with the electricity, and that was a beautiful sequence. So you're able to follow some of those true stories, incidents, to help pave the way for the show itself and the characters that we have.
I think that's just what Julian does. That is part of his writing. That is, he did that in Downton. He's done that in other shows, and he does that here. What the great thing about, we have a team of researchers working on different aspects of the show, and what is so great about it is we consistently, even as recently as 2 or 3 weeks ago, thinking ahead, should we be fortunate enough for a season 3, 2 or 3 weeks ago, something came across my desk from now I'm on every feed that has to do with American history, and you find these interesting things. You do a little deeper dive, you talk to a researcher, and then you talk to Julian and say, hey, maybe Marion could do this, or maybe Peggy could do that. So it's such a great wealth of information for us, and it's really fun. You get to pick and choose sort of some of the best stories of the period for one of your 30 characters.
And these are people that you really care about. Let's go back in your personal career. So you're the producer, correct, of the Gilded Age. That's your title, right? Producer.
It's an executive
producer. Yeah. Okay, but you started out. Well, I don't know about starting out, but you've been a co-producer on movies like Bad Santa. You've done The Great Debaters with Denzel Washington, Hugo with Martin Scorsese. You worked with Ben Affleck several times. How did you get started in the film industry?
I graduated from the University of Illinois. And I lived in Chicago. I stayed with my parents for a couple months after graduation, and then moved into the city. I was looking for jobs and found one at a commercial production company. Early '90s, the industry in Chicago, there was a lot of commercial production.
Was that an interest of yours, right? As a child, or young, I want to get involved in the creative economy, film or TV or production?
It was yes, it was. However, it was, coming from sort of, a modest, middle class, Midwest background, you just don't know about those sort of jobs. You don't know about those opportunities. And my parents were always, pretty open and pretty supportive, as long as you supported yourself, so to speak.
Right.
So that my dad said, well, give it a try. There's a lot of commercial production. Give it a try. See if you can get involved in production. See what that world is about. At the meantime, I was working at my aunt's restaurant,
Paying the bills.
every, in the evenings.
Yep.
And so I worked at a commercial production company, being a production assistant, doing every errand, whatever, for about, I don't know, 6, 8 months. And then when movies would come to town, Chicago was a fairly popular production hub at the time.
What year was this about?
This was about 1993.
Okay.
So, and then I would try to work on these films, and eventually, I kind of, got a little bit lucky. I posed as a reporter to call one production office, and they gave me the information of the production manager. I got a hold of the production manager, and and they just happened to be looking for an assistant accountant, which was really just a PA in the accounting department. But I had a business undergraduate business and from the University of Illinois, and as well as communications and film. So they said, well, hey, maybe you could do it. So it was a Michael Apted movie called Blink.
Oh, right.
Starring Aidan Quinn and Madeline Stowe. And yes. I worked in that office, and right after that, it is about getting your foot in the door. The production accountant said, well, I have this other movie, or I know somebody, a friend of mine has this other movie in Los Angeles. Do you want to come out there? And I said, sure. That was always part of my plan. It was never part of my plan.
Right,
I was just living, month to month, figuring it out. Right. And I moved out, and that next movie was The Mask, starring Jim Carrey. So I was I was an assistant production accountant. There's no glamour or glitz in that. But then I started to learn about the business and what I wanted to do. And now that I had a foot in the door, I could start to set myself.
You made yourself useful, right?
I made it simple, well put.
I try to tell people, well, how do I make yourself useful? Find ways to make yourself useful.
That is 100% true.
Be a good team player. Be responsible. Be on time. And be happy. Nobody wants to go into a battle with someone who's complaining and all, and just someone who's enthusiastic. And obviously, when someone suggests that they've got a friend who's got another movie, that means that they respect you, like you, know that if they're going to suggest you for another show, you're not going to embarrass them. You're going to make them look good, right? I talk to a lot of young people. I have kids. I have a daughter who just graduated from university, and I tell other kids who I meet or young people, it's, every industry, every business, they need good people. They need good people. They need people who are eager and who want to work and who want to do things. And so if you just, you stay in the game long enough and you work hard enough. And again, the business now is different, and it's not easy. I'm not saying, especially this one. But nonetheless, we always are looking for a good one of that, or of this. So it's out there. Yeah, you're looking for good teammates, right? And just
correct
folks who
people you want to be around, people who
are pleasant,
like-minded people, similar goals to make good stuff and work on good stuff and work with good people, etc.
Right. So, what was it like? What's it like? Obviously, you work with Michael Apted, who is a great director. Did you get to spend any time with him? He ended up
not then. I actually ran into him years later at I believe it was a DGA event. He was the president of DGA for a while. I ran into him, and I actually made a point to go up to him, and I said, "I'm sure you don't remember me, but
you like your coffee hot."
Exactly. But we had a good laugh, and he was such a gentleman, and it was that. So it was years later that, it wasn't until years later, perhaps the first director I remember working with or talking to as a, not as a colleague. He was far my superior or my boss, but somebody I could talk to was Wes Craven, who was a great
Oh,
man.
right.
Directed a lot of movies,
Horror movies.
Nightmare on Elm Street being his first big one, but then I worked with him on a few movies, and the first one being Scream,
Oh, yeah.
the first Scream with Drew Barrymore,
What,
Courtney Cox, etc.
what was your position on Scream?
I was the production accountant, actually.
Okay.
So that was about 5 years after this other thing, or after the stories I've just told. I kind of moved up quickly, and again, it was a changing time in the industry. So they were like, "That guy, we'll take him." Just we, and
He's responsible for our money.
exactly. So I did that, and I got to know Wes. But you were just talking about directors, so that was the first director who I had a relationship with, and what a lovely man.
I've heard so many nice things about him. A few of my friends had developed some projects with him, and they would rave at what a nice guy he was.
I also saw him years ago. He's passed now, but
Right.
I saw him years ago. Maybe not even that many. Call it 10 or 12. On Martha's Vineyard. He spent a lot of time in your neck of the woods, not your state, but your neck of the woods,
Yep.
and so he enjoyed your New England.
Now, let me ask you something. How did you get involved in Hugo, the beautiful award-winning movie? Martin Scorsese directed that. How did that all come about? How did David Crockett become a producer on that?
I was working I had done The Town. Graham King, who was producer and financier, part financier of The Town, along with Warner Brothers. Excuse me. He was starting a small production company. He had some financing, and had this little movie. It was not a little movie; it was a massive movie
Right.
called Hugo. And I was coming in to run production, to develop this new project, to kind of, it's a small company, so it was jack of all trades, come in, be one of the three or four people at the top of this company, and let's figure stuff out. Within, I think, the day I started at the company was the day that Hugo started filming.
Oh, okay.
And then there were some issues. It was a very complicated shoot. It was filmed 3D.
Yeah.
And at that time, 3D meant you had two cameras. There were two cameras mounted on one rig, so you had two large cameras. It was very cumbersome. It was time consuming. It was a very big production period, of course. Dogs, kids, the whole thing. So they ran into a few production issues early on, and Graham asked me to kind of go over and see what I could do, and so I went over and then became a part of the day-to-day of the show.
Wow, it's a fabulous movie. I'm going to ask you, and it sounds like in that area too. Again, you're representing the financier, right? In that capacity.
Yeah.
What's it like? And again, you're such a highly respected producer. And I've spoken, I don't know if you know who Dick Zanuck is.
Yeah.
So Dick was a friend of mine. At one point, he was the head of 20th Century Fox, and then he became a producer who did Jaws and all. And, ended up the Tim Burton films. And one time I was asking him about, what's it like, being the producer for the creative side, but yet you also have to be the guy that the studio trusts. And he said they both think I'm working for both of them, which I am. And I wanted to talk to you about that. Like, what does that feel like to have to be responsible for the money for the studios, networks, financiers, but at the same time, you want to give people like Julian Fellows or Ben Affleck, you want to make sure they get the maximum bang for their buck. What is that like?
I think you're constantly, well, let me put it this way. To me, it's the biggest challenge, but it's also my favorite challenge. Like I love it. I wouldn't have it any other way. I think the creative and the financial, it is a business at the end of the day, and a business where oftentimes, large sums of money are at stake. And if you don't do it right, you may not get to do it the next time.
Yeah.
So you're always, and I think that's a good way to put it, is you are working for both. And at the end, you kind of have to look at yourself, and you're trying to deliver the best thing. Like I'm trying, always, and so it becomes a lot of your own judgment, but then you're selling perhaps the creative team on or the director or the creator on maybe making something smaller because you inherently feel, and you could be wrong, I could be wrong just like anybody else, but you inherently feel like, well, if we go super big on this and spend all of this and do all that, it's really not going to bring enough added. Right. Or conversely, you might say, if we don't do this big, cool, amazing thing, well, then the whole feel of the thing isn't going to be the same. So then I'm going to go back to the money side and the studio and say, look, trust me, you want this. If you don't have this, you're not going to have the thing you have in your head.
Right.
So it's always a negotiation, sometimes with myself, sometimes with the creative, sometimes with the studio. But I enjoy it because I think it's really a big picture and trying to determine what the best way forward is. And again, like I said, anybody can be wrong, and you learn things all the time.
Are you trying to be transparent and predictable and not surprise folks as much as possible? I know that there's always something that's going to come up, but is that something you're trying to do? So are you making a lot of the decisions before shooting starts, or is it just ongoing?
You try to make as many of the big decisions before shooting as possible. But of course, these shoots nowadays, especially Gilded Age, could be 150 days, which is, at 20 to 23 business days per month. That's many months, 7-8 months.
Right.
And what happens, things change as you go. You save money on things, you spend money on things, you learn more about a character that you're like, oh, we should see more of it. You know what? This scene was amazing. We should do 2 more because we can explain the rest of that story. So you want to be as prepared as possible, have as many of the big decisions done, but then you have to be ready to audible throughout your lengthy time.
When you're negotiating the budget, let's say in the beginning, let's say we have a film and Ben Affleck's directing it, and it's, I don't want to say The Town 2, but let's say it's The Town 2 as an example.
Which doesn't exist, but who knows, someday.
Right, right. Well, when you're negotiating with the studio, are you providing yourself some flexibility on the budget? How much elbow room do you have?
Well, it becomes a thing, based on experience of what you think, and there's a lot of factors involved. It could be a director who is known for shooting a lot of overtime or shooting extra time, or it could be the studio says, look, you have this, we will not spend a penny more than this, and we are serious. Or not even the studio, it could be independent financier. So you could have, theoretically or actually, X amount of dollars in a bank account, and you can't go over that. So you have to sort of protect for that. So there's many different ways, but you're always, again, it's just based on experience of saying, okay, we've got a 40-day shoot. So we've got 8 weeks, what can go wrong? What can go right? If it all goes right, maybe then we'll do this extra scene, or we'll blow this thing out at the end to make it huge. So, and the best partners, Ben is great at this because Ben Affleck is, business minded as well, and he knows. And again, I think it goes back to what I said, is like, if you do it well and you're successful, and then you're allowed to do it again, or you're wanted to do it again. And if and part of that being successful is bringing things in, at the price that was agreed upon. So that, again, in a business model, you can keep going.
Do you have a favorite part of, there's pre-production and production and post-production. Do you have any favorite parts that you in particularly love? Or do you love the whole process?
Well, I mean, they're all so different. I mean, it's some producers, people always say, well, producer, what does that even mean? Everybody there, says they're a producer, I enjoy my style of producing or my type of producing because I am involved in the development, I am involved in the pre-production, and I am involved in the production and then the post-production. So it just in a for you know in the course of your life, there's that variety there and those different skills that you get to bring in different parts of your brain that you work. So I do enjoy them all. I do really enjoy the sort of the moving from the writing period into the pre-production period. It is the most perhaps well, I was going to say it's the most creative, not necessarily, but it is a very creative time because you're really trying to figure out what's important, what the tone is. You're working with in a film, you're working with the director primarily. In a television show, you're working with the creator most typically, but you're trying to figure out what the heart of that show is. And I really enjoy that. And then, as some writers will tell you, mainly writers, but some directors will tell you, after that, everything becomes compromises because you never have enough money or things are always too big or whatever. So instead of this, we're going to do that. So, but again, I enjoy that too, because then you're trying to find it, and often, you'll find this solution and it'll be a eureka moment, and you figure out how you're going to do it, or you find the perfect location, or you find the perfect actor, and it's fun.
Are you in? Do you develop your own projects, or are you more of a producer for hire?
I would say throughout most of my career, I've developed a few things. There's one thing I have right now that is working with Ben Affleck's new company, Ben and Matt's new company, Artist Equity. We have a film called Unstoppable that stars Jennifer Lopez and others, and it is a film that I had developed with some partners for years, and we had scripts and drafts and everything, and then we finally got it to this point. We're half shot, and the strike shut us down for a little bit, so that's come back. So really excited about that. That'll be out next year.
Yep.
But a lot of times what I'm brought in is at the script stage. There's a script, there's something. The Town, there was something. There was a script. And Ben called.
That's a fabulous movie, man.
It's still one of my favorites that I worked on. I feel proud to have been a part of it. But it was like, okay, here's a script. How are we going to do this? What should we do? What do you like? What don't you like? And then, he did a lot of the writing to rewrite and make it kind of what it was.
I remember having to call you after I saw it because I loved it so much. My friends said, you have to see The Town. And finally, I was able to see it. And I was like, oh, my God, this movie is terrific. I mean, and complex. There was a lot of production value on that.
A lot of production value. A lot of kind of, I think it completely holds up today, but in some ways there's some like old school action, stuff you don't see, and really character driven. How
can I ask you something? One of my favorite actors, he passed away, Pete Postlethwaite.
Oh,
how was he to work with? Great actor, character actor.
He had a little bit of a reputation for being a little salty because he was so, he was just so great, and he was at the top of his craft. Not rude, but just a little, it's like didn't suffer fools, that sort of thing. So we were all like, okay,
just so I can say, just for the audience, he was in the movie In the Name of the Father with Daniel Day-Lewis. I think that was the first time I saw him. He was in Jurassic World, or the second Jurassic Park.
Correct.
He was in Amistad here in Rhode Island, and he was a titan of the London theater. Yeah.
Yes.
Great face. I love his face.
Great face and just terrific. And so we were all a little, we at the time I don't know what I was, 38 or in my upper, still on the younger side of things, and you have this sort of icon from London coming in, and so we were all a little, I wouldn't say nervous, but yeah, just a little bit. And he couldn't have been more of a gentleman. He only worked with us for about a week or perhaps two. I can't remember exactly, but a handful of days and across maybe a couple weeks. And he acted like he was a guest on our set, and we thought, we were so fortunate to have him as a guest. So he was
the villainous florist who controlled a lot of the criminal element. And
correct. And again, it's like he doesn't have that many scenes, but immediately this guy has
power.
A weight
Yeah.
and a power that, yeah, exactly, that just
And
exudes.
what's it like working with Ben? Does Ben like to? Do you have to, as a producer, set aside on your schedule rehearsal time? Is there that? Do some directors? Do you have to do that? And do some directors like to rehearse blocking and stuff in advance, or how does that work for you as the producer?
I think it's part of, as a producer, you're trying to give the director, especially in film, but also in television as well. You're trying to give them the biggest palette for them to paint whatever they want to paint, and keep it as free as possible. So, to answer your question, everybody sort of approaches it differently. Some like to do a lot of rehearsal. Some say they don't want to do any rehearsal. They want to come in fresh, or just maybe we're going to talk about the scene in pre-production or the day before, and then kind of roll in and just see where it goes. And others are very okay. I'd like the actor to stay here, stand here, come over here, and so it
But
just it really
but
depends
someone
on the
like Ben,
person.
does Ben like to rehearse?
I think because he has an actor background, and again, I haven't worked with him. I've worked with him as a producer recently.
Right.
As a director, it's been a while. He liked to do some rehearsal, but he did, being an actor, he didn't want to over rehearse. And a lot of times, as a director gets more experience, they know how quickly they can do this, and then allow more time, for that. So some directors, when they're newer, want to rehearse more, have that all down, and then they'll have other time for camera movement or lighting or understanding different things. The more experienced they get, I find it moves more quicker, and they just like anything else, you know what's important and what's not.
Yeah. Do you ever have to, as a producer, ever have to put your foot down and say, no, we cannot do this? Do you have to be, I hate to use the word, a policeman or to that extent, or do you try to
I
avoid
mean,
that?
it happens every once in a while, but I think if you do your job well, and if, to the best of your ability, and you're really sort of bringing parties together, and empathizing with people, and giving people what they want, truly what again, for most directors and creators, and the film or television show itself, you're always fighting for that show. So if it comes to the point where you have to say, no, this isn't going to happen, that then something's going wrong. So has that ever happened? Sure.
Yeah.
But it's not, I don't think it's that common.
Now let me ask you this because there's some CG work in the Gilded Age, which I look at, I'm like, wow, that looks great. It never takes me out of the story. Like, it's always seamless. Do you ever get worried as a producer when you have to wait for visual effects, and how good are they going to be? Do you ever have to send them back and say, this isn't good enough?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, our team on Gilded Age in particular, most recently, they're just terrific. But they're always looking for feedback, because these shots, I'm never worried at all about the small, I mean, not even the medium-sized shots. But sometimes when you're creating an entire palette of a background, it's very, very complicated. And not to mention, our eyes aren't always correct. I mean, like, we don't know exactly what things look like. And let's say a big background, say, oh, we're looking across the water, looking across, the Hudson at the city circa 1882. Like, we don't know exactly. We have a few pictures, very few, but there's lighting elements, there's moving boats, there's waves and water. So we think we know. So there have been things that I'm like, can we change this in this shot on this train? And the visual effects person has been like, no, that's real. And you're like, oh wow, it's the way the light hits and whatever. So there's so many complex things playing out. But anyway, no, I don't, those things are planned and worked over, and
You have
so
time.
much in advance. So,
You have time. Do you prefer, if you can, to capture as much practically? Like, the town seems like it was, as far as I know.
that was mostly practical.
Right.
And yeah, the truth is even when you're doing a big visual effects shot, the more elements in it that are real, it gives the artists, the VFX artists, more information, because so much of what your eye perceives is based on lighting. So you have to really understand, and how lighting works is very complex as far as how it reacts with different surfaces, how it the shadows and all of that. So if you're manufacturing all of that, the more information you have at different points in the background, it just makes it that much more real. So yes, you're always trying to, even in a shot where it's 90% visual effects, you're trying to make sure that you have 10% that is very real, closest to the actors, but as much as you can have. Can I get 15% real? Because that'll just make everything else better.
Are you dealing with the casting process and then also the salaries? Are you negotiating that yourself? Are you doing that? How does that process work?
Again, it's different on every show. I mean, casting on the Gilded Age is Bernie Telsey and Adam Caldwell. And then Michael Engler is a fellow executive producer and also director of about half the episodes. He
did Downton Abbey. He directed the Downton Abbey film.
Absolutely. He's from New York. He's from the New York theater scene as well. I mean, he's from Chicago, but he's lived in New York forever, and he is so knowledgeable. I mean, he knows so many of the actors personally, or he knows theater inside and out. So between Bernie, Adam, and Michael on this show, they are going through all the people. Oh, it could be great for this who I saw in . So they're doing that. Then we'll review it, say, oh, this person seems like they'd be better for that. Julian will sign off and most of the time says great. Sometimes he says, oh, that's not what I pictured. So then you adjust. And then from a negotiation standpoint, sometimes, I mean, it's a combination of Bernie, Adam, me, and business affairs,
Right.
really.
So you say, this is what our budget is for the cast, and then you let them handle the specifics pretty much?
Well, it's always a little more complicated than that, because so much of how you pay an actor after the main ones, when you're talking about these kind of guest stars, so much depends on the schedule. So it's working with Holly Ryman,
Yes.
who is our line producer, working with our ADs to figure out, okay, all right, let's try to shoot them across these 2 weeks and blah blah blah. If we do that, Bernie, what would you say is fair? Okay, that's this business affair. So there's a lot of back and forth and around about what's the best way to sort of structure it.
Do you have a favorite? Well, let me ask you this, and we have to. Unfortunately, we're running out of time. But do you love the part? I always love it as a filmmaker when the film is scored. Do you love the scoring session that happens at the end of each film, or
the best scoring sessions I think I've ever been a part of are for the Gilded Age. I mean, it is unbelievable experience. It is humbling and satisfying, and just it's really joy. It's just pure joy when you're sitting in a sound booth, a large sound booth. There are 50 members plus of an orchestra, violins and cellos and violas and drums and oboes and a harp is over here. And then on the screen behind that, you see a scene from the Gilded Age, and you are literally, as if I don't know if anybody has been to the Hollywood Bowl, or if you've been to one of these big outdoor arenas during the summer where they will play The Sound of Music and they'll have a live orchestra or whatever. It is literally that, scene by scene. And, Harry Gregson Williams and Rupert Gregson Williams, the brothers, who one is in LA, one is in London, their work is just, I marvel at it.
Outstanding. I love the music. When I first heard that title sequence too, I can hear it. I don't want to sing it for you now, but it comes in my brain.
The scripts for the second season, we're reading scripts and working on things. I'll frequently have it in the background because it just immediately sort of takes you there and gets you in the right tone and frame of mind.
It's wonderful. Well, I want to say that's wonderful. You're wonderful. I really, really appreciate working with you. I appreciate our friendship. Everybody, the crew loves you. You really put out such a nice, you don't just represent yourself and your family and the production, but you represent the film and television community in such a positive way. And I can't thank you enough for all you've done and the collaborative efforts. And I want to thank you so much again for being our guest on this week's double feature. We could talk for hours. At least I could talk to you for hours.
We have talked for hours before, and we could talk for hours again. I just want to say one thing, and that I would like to thank you, the state of Rhode Island and Newport has been such a great host to us, such a great backdrop for our show. Newport as Newport, and then Newport, parts of it as New York City circa 1883. It has been such a wonderful, the Preservation Society and all of the representatives, have just been such supporters, great people who, like-minded, just want to do good things and put good things out there. So it's an honor to be a part of it.
We're all rowing together. David
That is the
Crockett,
truth.
thank you so much for being on Double Feature, and I wish you continued great health and happiness.
Absolutely. Thank you, Stephen. Much appreciated.
Thank you.